Join us today on Beyond the Lair, where we speak to Trent Zacharias from Synovus. Trent gives us insight on authentic social impact, profit with purpose, and learning from listening. Hello, welcome to Beyond the Lair, a podcast which elevates Indigenous entrepreneurism and organizations that are elevating Indigenous peoples. I am one of your co-hosts. My name is Gina Jackson Montgomery. My traditional name is Cetacia, and I'm a proud member of the Seashell Nation. I'd like to introduce my co-host.
Yeah. Hi there, everyone. My name is Dean Montgomery. I am a Cree from Saskatchewan, and I'm just happy to be here with Trent today.
And we are very, very excited to get this started. So our esteemed guest today is Trent Zacharias. He is Community and Indigenous Affairs, Sustainability, and Stakeholder Engagement for Synovus, an energy company. So Synovus, we're really thrilled, has been sponsoring the Bears Lair for about a year. And Trent was one of our esteemed guest judges that's coming up for the Bears Lair TV show, which is premiering June 4th. So I'd like to welcome you, Trent, to our program today.
Thank you, Gina. It's always great to see you. And Dean, of course, nice to meet you. I'm calling in today from Treaty 7 territory in Calgary, Alberta, which is also home to Districts 5 and 6 of the Métis Nation.
Fantastic. So Trent, tell us a little bit about Synovus, first of all, and then we're going to get into your career and where that has brought you, because I know that you've been with Synovus for just a small little bit of about 18 years. But tell us about the company, and then we'd love to hear about your journey.
Sure. Yeah, you're right. I've been here a while. I can't believe how long or how quickly the time goes by. Synovus is an integrated energy company. So we have operations all across Canada, the US, and Asia Pacific. We're involved in the exploration, production, transportation, and refining of oil and gas. Specifically, I guess, when it comes to Indigenous relations and Indigenous engagement, our biggest focus is really here in Canada and all of our operations, with some of our biggest operations being in Alberta and then into Saskatchewan and a little bit on the East Coast of Canada as well.
Excellent. And let's start with you. Let's start with your career. Number one, what brought you to this career path, and where did you start? And what are you responsible for now? And I've got so many questions to ask about your journey, but let's start from the beginning.
Yeah. I guess really in terms of what led me to doing this as a career, the simplest answer I would say is curiosity. I grew up in a small farming community in East Central Alberta. And one of my favorite things to do as a kid was out on the farmland, you would still routinely find arrowheads. And I remember having conversations with my grandfather about, why these arrowheads were there. And we'd get into these conversations about the Indigenous people, the First Nations people that were in those areas long before, of course, settlers were ever there. And it really struck me as odd, even as a child, that we didn't really learn about it. We didn't talk about it. I wasn't next to an Indigenous community or anything like that. And that curiosity stayed deep inside of me. And I was always really hungry to learn as much as I could about Canada's First People. You fast forward that, and by chance, I was working for a forestry company, and my background in my career is really actually in communications. And the forestry company I was working for hired an individual to champion their business development work with Indigenous communities. I had never heard of that as a career. And again, the curiosity came into play where I spent every minute that I could in his office, just getting him to talk to me about what it was that he was doing, why he was doing it. Anytime he went to communities, I would ask if I could go. And I would frame it as, I think this is something our company should be talking about. I think this is something our company should be paying attention to. And through that relationship, I got exposed to an entirely new world and an entirely new career opportunity. At that very same time, the oil sands in Alberta, at least for the type of business that Synovus is in, which uses steam injected deep underground was really starting to take off, and companies were paying attention and realizing that they needed to have meaningful engagement with Indigenous communities, ranging from consultation to business development. And I was living in a community then called Lac La Biche, which is kind of in the center of that. And really, again, by curiosity and good fortune, I was introduced to basically to Synovus and got a position. And I've spent the last 18 years doing what I do.
So you've always been, I mean, besides maybe some titles changing, did you have a group of people that you work with, or were you the person responsible for Indigenous relations and then developed a team around you?
Right. So when I started out, I was in an entry level position. I was located in one of the communities closest to our operations, closest to one of our operations, and I had responsibility for leading our engagement activities in that region. The area that I was responsible for is an area near the Métis community of Conklin, Alberta, and the other, like the closest First Nation near it, is Chipewyan Prairie First Nation, and then Chard Métis are nearby as well. And so I was based out of there and was responsible just for working in that community. Um, I had an opportunity to move in more of a leadership role in 2010 to lead a fairly small team, but it was my first step into leadership. And that's when I moved from Lac La Biche down to Calgary, and then changed jobs a couple of different times. And after Synovus bought Husky Energy in late 2020, early 2021, then that's when I moved into the director position and had a much broader responsibility than I had at any other point in my career.
It's amazing. 18 years ago, Indigenous inclusion was, I don't even know if the term was phrased at that point. It just come around. So it's amazing that you jumped into it. But, you think about Synovus and it's this publicly traded company, but, you look at so much more that you're doing and, your ESG, your sustainability, technology. I mean, is there anything that you could really comment on that and how far it's come and where you are?
Yeah, for sure, Dean. I mean, a lot of change in 18 years, and I've seen a lot of progress and development, maturity in the relationships between industry and Indigenous communities, particularly in the areas where Synovus operates. And I can't say it's just us. I think our industry as a whole has really embraced the opportunity to work with the Indigenous people that are near our operations. And you've seen sort of the changes over time in terms of what's important in those relationships. I mean, there's certain things that have been mainstays, like respecting Aboriginal and treaty rights. I mean, that's table stakes. You have to do that. You have to do meaningful consultation. You have to have relationships that are built on mutual trust and respect, and being engaging with one another, not when you want something, but because you genuinely want to be welcomed into the region. And then there's things that have been introduced over time that have changed. Like I remember when we signed our first impact benefit agreement for the type of business we were in, that was pretty much unheard of. And, there was a lot of discussion around, well, is this where the industry is going? And communities were really adamant that they needed to see that. Now it's just, again, it's table stakes in some of these areas when you're operating. Business development has always been important, but I would say the amount of business development that we do together is increased. And then, of course, now we're seeing lots of examples of equity partnerships and things like that. So it has really progressed. One of the things I'm really proud of at Synovus that I've witnessed in 18 years here is it used to be pockets of people championing this and recognizing that it was important. And I will admit, like in my career, I would know who those people were, and I would seek them out in the organization as advocates and allies to push forward this important work and make sure that the Indigenous communities that we were working with were getting to benefit. I look at it now, and it's just part of how we do business. You see people just embracing it as part of how we operate, the same way as you would do for safety or environment or different things, and just knowing that it's important and you need to do well at it.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. And I mean, you said, I think, the word now is the equity stake that nations are getting. And, and that keeps on growing, which is the way it should be. But do you see like what are some of the metrics that you follow, or what's important to you? And is it are there values that you have to employment or revenue, or how would
Sure.
Synovus think that's what would they like to share about that?
Right. So, I mean, there's a lot of different pieces when I look at the relationship that are important, but two that we've really singled out, and this has been based on our years of working with the communities. Like there, again, there's a multitude of things that are important, but in our environmental, social, and governance strategy, we've singled out two things, and that is, recognizing that business inclusion is important, and that doing business together gives communities the opportunity to create their own self sustainability. We recognize that one as one of the most important things that we can do to support them. And so, continuing on that journey and making sure that we're engaging local Indigenous businesses as much as we can in a thoughtful way is one thing. And then the second thing that we've singled out, um, which I really think is a wraparound of doing your Indigenous engagement in the right way, is seeking gold certification in progressive Aboriginal relations from the Canadian Council of Aboriginal Business. So those are two pieces that we're really pulling. And within that PAR certification, though, it encompasses everything. It looks at employment, it looks at business, it looks at relationship management, it looks at all of those pieces. So those are two that we've really singled out.
Yeah, it is. That PAR program is fantastic. Gina and I have been big supporters of it since the day it came out, and all the great people that started it. So, yeah.
Lovely. And I know that Tabitha Bull and former JP Gladue, and before him, Clint Davis, working with the CCAB and really making it industry standard for excellence. And Dina and I worked at a company together called Alltech, and a lovely and fantastic company. But I know that we applied for the program for bronze and also silver. And to all of our audiences out here, it is really the industry standard, and it is not easy to get a gold standard
No.
for this. Is the top tier. It you have to talk about employment. You have to talk about benefits to the community. What are your core values? What is your how many Indigenous employees do you have? How do they communicate? How do you communicate with them and make them feel like they're included, and all of us have a safe place and there's a sense of equality? So kudos to you
Yeah,
and
it's an
Synovus.
investment. We know that it's a big
Yeah.
investment.
It is
Well,
a big investment.
to your point too, Gina, I mean, one of the things we really debated was whether to single out and say gold as a standard, knowing how very difficult it is. And really, we looked at it and said, look, like we want to strive to be the best that we can be in this space. And PAR provides you a really good framework to do that. And so why not go for that? And if you're successful, that's fantastic. But even if we aren't, we've gone through this journey of identifying what we're doing well and using gold as that standard of where we can get better. There's really no downside.
No, you're right. Yeah, it's the framework that it sets us up for, and the same thing why Gina brought it up. It's really just an education for anyone. We love it.
Absolutely. Now, you talked about procurement being really important. And I know that you and I have spoke about this and identifying the priorities within community. And both Dina and I have worked in business for a long time on the Indigenous side, working for the Squamish Nation, and also the industry side, and both of us having 20 plus years worth of experience. Every nation is different in respect of their priorities, but I think what we all can identify and attest to is that housing is something that is needed straight across the board, nationwide, for all communities. Synovus has a $50 million commitment to 6 communities for 200 homes. Can you tell us about that and how you got that? Because I don't think that you really get into the community until you identify that housing is a problem and how you can relationship build and give back that way.
Sure. Well, I'll start with the journey that we went on, Gina, and give you the context as to how and why we landed there. So it was shortly after I think it was in early 2018. At that time, we had a new CEO, Alex Corbet, who is now the executive chair of our board. And Alex is just a tremendous advocate for doing what's right with Indigenous communities. And he wanted to go out and visit the communities. And really, he asked a very simple question when we went into those meetings. He said, what is it that you need or what's important to you, and how can we help? And in every single one of the communities that we visited, not surprisingly, housing was number one. Because unfortunately, I think you could go to every corner of this country in any Indigenous community, and you're going to see that housing is something that is in critical need. And so, something that I look back on that decision, and Alex came forward and said, well, we need to do something about this. And typically, I think industry would shy away from doing something else because, we would look and say, that is clearly government responsibility. We want to support nations, but this is kind of our lane over here, and over here it isn't. And Alex is just one of those tremendous leaders that I would say more than anybody I have ever worked with has leadership courage. And he looked at that and said, well, that's really not a good reason for us not to do it. Let's do something. And so we put together a proposal looking at those 6 nations to figure out what could we do to make a meaningful impact. And that's where we came up with the idea of investing $50 million to build homes. Now, that's probably going to be, by the time all is said and done, a little bit closer to $60 million because we integrated a training program into it and we increased the funding, recognizing that coming out of COVID, the cost of construction had gone up. And it was really important to us that we get to that 200 home mark. So we're about 121 homes in right now, and we're kind of on the home stretch.
Amazing. Can you name off some of the nations that
Sure.
that are benefiting from this? And then
Yes.
and then how do you choose 6 nations?
Right.
Right?
So the 6 nations that are part of this right now is Cold Lake First Nations, Beaver Lake Cree Nation, Heart Lake First Nation, Chippewa Prairie First Nation, the Conklin Métis, and the Chard Métis are the 6 nations that are in it. And really, we chose those nations because at that point in time for our company, when we did this, going back to the assessment in 2019 and then launching in 2020, our 2 biggest assets then were our 2 biggest oil sands facilities, which are still in operation today. And those 6 communities are core communities that really, when I look back for at least the past 18 years that I've been here anyway, those are the 6 nations that we've consistently worked with, consulted with, engaged with relative to that project. There's different ones that we deal with kind of off and on through that, but those 6 were the ones that going back for a fairly long period of time that we've consistently worked with. So we felt like that was a good place to start.
Excellent. And I know that we all talk about procurement. So in respect of building those homes, do you resource and reach out to the community first and foremost in respect of who is skilled to project manage or do trades or a foreman or construction or anything like
Right.
that?
Sure. So one of the things we heard really early on from the communities was they wanted to own it. They wanted to own the construction in their communities, and that matched up well for our expectation too. Because we looked at it and said, look, like we know there's a need. We have some skills that can be helpful, but we also don't want to be in the housing business. There are far more competent organizations, or, construction companies that can do that. And so we leave a lot of that decision with the communities. So the communities are selecting the home, where they're going to get their homes from. Some are doing ready to move homes. Some are doing construction on site. What we've done is we've used our supply chain management expertise and people to negotiate reduced rates with some of those companies, and then on everything from the construction through to even the furnishings of the homes, doing that. And then the other thing that we always consistently offer is, we've built multi-billion-dollar oil sands projects. doesn't necessarily translate over to building a home, but there's some core competencies and skills that, regardless of whether you're building a home or building a facility, can be helpful. And so, what we've offered to communities is during this construction process, you have access to our expertise. If you need to talk to a supply chain person, if you need to talk to an engineer, we have those people available to you. Feel free to use us as you see fit.
Yeah, great. Yeah. I guess a question too, I think, it's really important and Gene and I talk about this a lot. And, one of the most important parts of, working in Canada and for everyone to benefit is, what what we all learn from each other. So I guess what does Synovus learn from working with Indigenous communities?
I think the importance of listening. I think that's probably the most important thing, and that's something that I know I consistently remind myself of. Um, I'm a talker. I love to have conversations, and I will tell you when I'm working with Indigenous communities, I'm consciously, making sure that I'm pausing and spending far more time listening than I am talking, and I learn far more by doing that and by listening to them than I ever would by inserting myself in those conversations. They have a lot of wisdom to share, a lot of insight to share, and a lot of the time our job is to sit back and listen to that wisdom and that experience. So I would say that's one learning. The second learning that I have is that I cannot think of a single community that we work with, a single Métis or First Nation that we work with that is opposed to development. I think wherever we operate, they're very much in favor of responsible development, participative development, being a part of it. And I get discouraged sometimes when you look in mainstream media, and if you didn't know better, you would think that there's this pitting against one another, and that really is never the case. Like our relationships with Indigenous communities wherever we operate are good, but they have a very reasonable and firm expectation of us, and that is that they should benefit from what we're doing. And I think any of us would want the same thing if we were in that same situation.
Yeah. And I think, one thing that we've always found too is that just as a company grows with the nation partnership or any community is the corporate culture. It can't help but gain so much from the communities themselves and the values and the land where we're working. And yeah, I was wondering if you had any comments on that.
Yeah, I mean the value of traditional knowledge in in everything that we do is incredible, and I think we need to make sure that we're paying more attention to that. I was chatting with someone this morning about an example of that I'll never forget. Very early in my career, and it has always stuck with me and served as a bit of a guiding light to me too in terms of how to approach. The discussions with the community and making sure that we do listen to that traditional knowledge is we were proposing to drill a well in an area in northeastern Alberta. And I was managing the consultation at the time, and I was sitting down with a group of elders, and this was in Chippewa Prairie First Nation. And one of the elders pointed on the map where we were proposing this well, and he said, "Why are you putting that well there?" And I was getting, prepared for this discussion around, traditional usage, or maybe it was a site of critical importance because that often will come up. And he said, no, that area there, that's swampy. You don't want to put a well there. And he pointed at another spot on the map and said, this is a much better location. And I brought it back internally, and we had some discussions. People were like, I don't know. I don't. We're pretty firm that this location we picked is good, but we'll go out and we'll take a look. Sure enough, they go in and they take a look, and the spot that the elder chose was higher ground. It was good clay foundation. It was a much better suited location for that well than the one that we chose, thinking that we knew that it was a better location. So, I mean, and that's just one example. But the value of traditional knowledge and incorporating that when we can, and again, going back to listening, like listening to that elder and then taking that information back.
I think that's a really excellent point because from where you have the traditional knowledge keepers, but just the members that that walk on that land, that hunt on that land, that have gone for walks, that have grown up within that territory, opposed to somebody that's taking a look at a map and the elevation and not being able to do, even if they do a site visit, not being able to see the right places. So I think
Yeah.
I believe that so much is that leads to my next question of authentic consultation. So I know that Synovus does a really great job, and behind many companies like Synovus, like yourself, there's great people that come in with full intentions of trying to be authentic, to go in and consult with Indigenous communities. What are what is your advice for new companies going in that are much smaller, of course, but their initial consultations with Indigenous communities? I know what I think and what I know. But I want to know from your point of view if you're giving advice to young people that are just starting out or young companies that are coming out that have the opportunity to get into a place where they're presenting to chief and council or an economic development conference or corporation.
Right. I mean, I think, there's a few different things to keep in mind. And I will say we do this even when we're going into new areas, we follow the same approach. I mean, the first thing is always check with the communities ahead of time. Talk to them about what their preferred approach is. What are their protocols? Because every nation is different, and I think sometimes in the non-Indigenous communities, we tend to look at Indigenous people as a whole and forget that the individuality of each nation. And so always making sure you take that time and do that check to see what the proper protocol and process is. And then once that door is open to you, I mean, being respectful, being authentic, being honest, like be honest with what your intentions are, be honest with what you can do, be honest with what you can't do. And back to my earlier comment, spend more time listening than talking, and give them the time to process uh, the information that you give them. We also get wrapped up in what our timelines are. Well, a nation's timelines may be different than our timelines, and we have to make sure that we understand and respect that within that process. Um, I found over the years, like the big, one of the biggest learnings has been, and I think sometimes we shy away from uncomfortable conversations, and I have gotten way more positive feedback from nations for just being honest about something, and you know and being forthright and being prepared to tackle that uncomfortable conversation than you would have ever gotten by avoiding it.
No, and I think that's excellent advice, especially being honest and transparent because there's you can lose trust immediately. And if you're not, and if you make a mistake, just admit it. We're all human beings. And I also think that for authentic procurement and consultation, we have something called Google. Look up the population, look up the territory of where they are, the language that they speak, the priorities. I think asking a nation to what are your biggest priorities? Of course, they're housing, which is exactly what you have taken on yourself.
Yeah.
But is it education? Is it elders? Is it what is the important notes about that? And then volunteering. I always think regular communication on a regular basis. Don't just approach a nation because what's in it for me.
Yeah.
Approach it prior to a project or even starting to develop that relationship and then constant communication on a regular basis, even if it's for a 5-minute check-in once a week to say, how's it going?
Right.
That's how you develop it. I know that's how we've done a lot of our business. I wanted to ask you again about initiatives. So you have an economic reconciliation plan, and I know that you've got some great numbers that we've talked about that are out there and that you've already attained. So maybe you can talk about that.
Sure. So within our ESG strategy, we have one of our targets is really specific to economic reconciliation, and so the target is to spend a minimum of $1.2 billion with Indigenous businesses between 2019 and year end 2025. That was our goal. I can tell you we've already hit that. In fact, as of the end of 2023, we are sitting at $1.6 billion. And we very intentionally made that a minimum because it's never the ceiling, it's the floor. And so from this point forward, it's really how much can we overachieve on that? I mean, we didn't. I'm not going to say we went about knowing that we absolutely knew we'd hit the 1.2, but if I knew that if we did things the way we were doing them, if we have the continued buy-in and leadership support, it was very, very attainable. And everybody has really rallied around that. One of the benefits in ESG targets is it rallies the organization around a common purpose, a common goal. And I really credit that for us being, able to hit that. 2023 is going to be the biggest spend we've had in our company's history. We haven't publicly disclosed it yet, but we're going to come in at around $660 million in spend with Indigenous businesses in 2023 alone. And that's building on the 4.4 billion that we've done all since 2010. So the economic reconciliation piece, I mean, I'm proud of a lot of things that we do. But I really look at that, and why I love that is because it's creating opportunity within the nations themselves and allowing them to generate wealth that they can direct within their nations.
Well, and the fact is, with you doing this, or with industry doing this, is it's just getting easier because there's a lot of sophisticated Indigenous companies that are growing really quickly, right? So, it wouldn't surprise me if you triple or quadruple your goals. So, congratulations on that. It's amazing.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
And what I would like to know as well, I have something when there's nations and industry that are working together, and you've got nations that are talking about we're not receiving the right opportunity, we're not participating in a lot of the procurement that's within our territories. I always say that you've got to set your own nation up for success as well. As industry partners, we would love in a perfect world to be able to come and propose an opportunity for the nation, but knowing how many entrepreneurs you have, how many skilled workers that you have, what are your partnerships that you have developed so that the subcontracting can be utilized in a cohesive manner, so there's full participation and core values still remain the same, being that you're vetting and partnering with like-minded individuals. What is, in your experience, would you give nations advice so that they can fully participate in procurement and working with industry when partnership opportunities come forward?
Right. So I mean, the first thing is just keeping us informed, right? Even on the businesses that you have available and the services that are there, making sure that we have that two-way conversation so that we know that who is currently from the nation that is participating. Because we also, as industry, will sometimes get people coming through our doors that claim that they're affiliated with the nation or community, and then we do a little bit of digging and we find out that isn't the case. And so we really rely on the nations as our source of truth for that. So that's number one. And I think the second thing, and this is really more around the partnership piece. So a lot of the nations, one of the ways they get engaged in business is striking joint venture partnerships with other businesses, different types of partnerships. And what we always ask of nations when they're doing that is before you proceed too far down that road, or if you're starting a new business, come and talk to us and tell us what you're thinking. Because if it's a service that we can't use, and then you stand this up and maybe you've invested capital in it, we want to let you know that ahead of time so that you don't invest this time, energy, and maybe even money. And then in the end, we don't have a place for them. Or if it's a joint venture partnership, if it's somebody that we have a history with, then we can share that with the nation to say, actually, we've done some work with them in the past. We have a great relationship. We've been really happy. It would be fantastic if you built a partnership together. Or we look and say, actually, we have a history with this business. It isn't somebody that we've used. Our past experience with them hasn't been great. So if you proceed with this partnership, the likelihood of getting work is not great. But we have to have that conversation with one another, and we're always more than happy to give that advice and insight.
Perfect. So in your experience, Trent, what would you say to entrepreneurs? And we're going to start, or my next question will be about entrepreneurs. The top five common jobs that industry would utilize within the construction, within the energy field, within the gas field, within what have you, to create where they could participate in this, but still be on their own territories and stay home.
Great question, Gina. And I would say that the first advice I would give anybody, so you don't run out and immediately go and start the businesses that I'm about to talk about, is different types of oil and gas business would have different needs. So even when I look at Cenovus, our oil sands versus what our conventional would require would be different versus what our midstream would require, our downstream would all be different. So when you're thinking about those things, just make sure they reach out, talk to their contacts at those companies, and just confirm what those business needs are. When I look at the top five probably opportunities, and they also would probably line up with the top five spend areas that we have with some of the Indigenous businesses we use. Maintenance. I mean, when you're operating a facility, very different than when you're investing capital. Like construction related businesses, you're going to do that during your construction, but then quite often after that, you don't have those same needs. Maintenance is something that you need through the lifespan of a project. So I think there's a multitude of different maintenance types of services out there. I think that's always a good one to look at. Kind of in that same vein is well servicing. We've got some really successful companies that work for us that are Indigenous owned. Pimi Well Servicing is a great example. They've been with us for well over a decade and very consistent, predictable work. Camps and catering for some of the bigger projects. We've got some fantastic long-term vendors that we've used there as well. Primco Dene, which is owned by Cold Lake First Nation. Any of the big operators that have camps, it's a great, it's a very good business to look at. And then heavy equipment. There's always a need for heavy equipment, whether you're constructing or whether you're doing some of the road maintenance. The needs may change, from construction through to maintenance in terms of what you need, but we always have a variety of equipment on our sites. The cautionary note I would put on the equipment side is if I look at the one type of business that a lot of the nations are into, it is heavy equipment. So just making sure that you're looking at that and making sure that the market isn't already saturated with some Indigenous owned businesses, because competition is good, but to a certain point, maybe it becomes too many service providers in a certain space.
Yeah, do you think are there other professional services as far as I don't know, accounting, engineering, design, anything like that?
Great question, and there should be. I mean, when I look at our top five spends, it's not in there, but I actually think that's an opportunity. I think if there's an area I would look at to say it's largely untapped, I think it would be in exactly those types of spaces. It's not that there aren't providers out there already, but I think there's probably a little bit more running room in those kinds of spaces than there are in maybe the more operationally focused areas where a lot of the nations are pretty well engaged in those areas already.
That's great. I was thinking about as well, we always think about the trades and we think about starting a company that the investment's going to be significant if you do start a company, and research is everything for sure. So listening goes on both areas where you can listen to your industry partner and let them talk to you about what's most needed, whether it be maybe a security company, fencing company, something like that. Like you said, catering and food services. But I also think that Cenovus is a big advocate for supporting entrepreneurs with whether it's corporate gifting, whether it's installations for your facilities, what have you. That is also something that people can think of. You're doing what you're doing anyway, but reaching out to Cenovus, who would they reach out to? that have the artists that would be able to do corporate gifting, that would be able to participate in supplying swag for areas that you're doing networking events and conferences?
Right. I mean, the one-stop shopping is really within my team. So within my team, we have an individual who is responsible for Indigenous business development and procurement. It's not to say that we're the ones writing the contracts, but one of the learnings from communities early on was they're like, we don't know who to talk to. Your companies are so big. Who do we talk to? And so we tried to create a space where it's kind of one-stop shopping, where if they want, they can come in, they talk to Dustin and my team, and then Dustin knows who to push those requests out to within the organization.
Well, that's excellent. Let's talk about your experience with in a different entrepreneur area. And I know Synovus supports a lot of initiatives like the housing initiative, education, entrepreneurism. You are a guest judge on our TV show, The Bears Lair, which is airing June 4th. And can you talk about what your experience was, why Synovus thought this would be an interesting platform, and what you thought of in person participating in something like this, and the entrepreneurs and the whole experience?
So, full disclosure, Gina, and I think you and I have talked about this. That was my first ever forte into TV. So the entire experience for me on a personal level was really incredible. Everything from the studio to you to the guest judges, the entire experience. I wish more people could have that because it was really neat to see how all of it unfolded and the thoughtfulness behind everything, the creativity, the work. I mean, there was so much going on in a very, very tight time frame. So I mean, I have to thank you for the opportunity to have been a part of that. I think the reason that we supported it, I mean, it was really twofold. I mean, as we've talked about in the podcast today, entrepreneurship is really a critical part about how Synovus works with Indigenous communities wherever we are. And so if we can get involved in something that encourages that, celebrates that, and creates a space for people to share their ideas and inspires future entrepreneurs, future Indigenous entrepreneurs, and non-Indigenous entrepreneurs, for that matter, who are watching this are inspired by the people bringing forward these ideas. I think it's incredible. I was blown away by the presentations that we had. I thought, it was a huge range and there were no bad ideas. All the ideas had merit in their own way. And one of the things that I was really struck by as well was the courage and the thoughtfulness of all of those entrepreneurs to come in, present an idea, and have it be judged. I mean, that takes a lot of courage. And I was so impressed with every single one of them. And I thought the entire experience was phenomenal.
No, that's great. And I think that the commonality between the entrepreneurs, as you were talking about the diversity, is that on purpose, Dean and I, when we were thinking about the show, wanted to have something that we promoted, which instead of competition was co-opetition. And that is where we have different entrepreneurs that don't have competitive businesses so that they can have that synergy and collaborative nature to work together in the future or elevate each other up. Because although there's prize money, I think you noticed in the entrepreneurs that pitched on your episode and sticking around for a while longer is that they really were rooting for each other. And how do you find that a similarity working with entrepreneurs, not on a TV show, but entrepreneurs in your history of working for the last 18 years and dealing with procurement and advancing entrepreneurs in the communities you work with?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you see Indigenous entrepreneurs lifting each other up all the time in the communities, and I'd love to see even more of that because they're in some cases they are competing for work. In a lot of cases, they aren't. And I think the more that, you can see that collaboration, that cooperation together, I think it further strengthens their ability to get new contracts, to keep the contracts they have, and maybe even go after bigger contracts because they are cooperating or collaborating together on something bigger. I love that about the Bears, Lair, and I love that when I see that in the nations that I'm working with, where they're lifting each other up, and as you say, not necessarily competing but cooperating.
Excellent. I know one of our big initiatives that Dean and I are doing right now with our Bears Lair team is we're working with the youth. So, subsidiary to the Bears Lair TV show, we also have Bears Lair Dream Camps, where we educate and inspire and elevate kids 11 to 18 year all over Canada. And love the participation of our sponsors, but are also our nations that are bringing us into community. And we've done 31 camps and taught about 850 kids now about entrepreneurism, but most importantly, having their voice heard in public speaking and social confidence and financial literacy. What are you finding with the youth of today? What do you think? Because I know we're a little bit older, so we're not the Gen X, and are we Gen X? I don't know.
We're not older. We're experienced.
We're experienced. We're experienced. But what are you finding with the youth today that, because I know that as an Indigenous person, our ancestors, our great aunties, our uncles, Chief Gibby Jacob, as you know, very well, was on our program last episode. And he talked about his teachings, and he's having a documentary called, I think it's called Back to the Fire or something, where it really teaches traditional teachings. But I think people like that have really elevated the youth today, that they can be whoever they want to be. What do you see? What does Cenovus see for the youth, for the new trades that are coming up, for the new employee opportunities and the entrepreneurs and the youth of today?
So I see a lot more opportunity for them, and I would see, I think, at a community level, a higher completion rate in high school. Like when I go back 18 years ago, I remember, I think it was my second year, I got invited to one of the communities, and they were having a graduation. And they invited me, and I have to admit, like I wasn't as knowledgeable then, hopefully, as I am now. I've learned a lot by listening to the communities, and I thought, oh, this is interesting. It's a high school graduation. What I failed to realize until I got there was that was their first group of grads in a couple of years. Fast forward to now, and I know specifically in that community, they have graduates every year, and so I'm seeing the the completion rates, the capacity in communities is definitely increasing. Just in, and really an 18-year time period relative to most, is a relatively short period to see that kind of a dramatic shift. And so I'm seeing a lot more completion rates, people pursuing those entrepreneurial opportunities, but also on the other side of that, furthering their education. So we have a scholarship program that we do in partnership with Inspire, where we provide 25 scholarships per year, and they're $5,000 per scholarship. In some of our earlier years, those would have been undersubscribed. Like we may not have even given out all of them, or we would have had to really challenge and go back and encourage people to apply. We have no problem with that now. So I'm seeing that the next generation is really pushing themselves, really challenging themselves, both on the education side, on the entrepreneurial side. Where we need to come in and be and do well is to make sure that they have opportunities in front of them when they go through that.
Yeah, education is the solution. It really is. We know that.
This has been such a fantastic interview so far and conversation, Trent. Where do you see yourself in 10 years personally? Where do you see Cenovus in 10 years in respective relationships with Indigenous communities and employment and supportive entrepreneurism? But let's start with, where do you see yourself in 10 years personally?
That's a tough question for me to answer. I have to be honest, because I'm one of those people that I kind of just I take things day by day. I'm not really looking out, you know, much beyond sort of the upcoming year, maybe even the upcoming month at times it seems like. But what I do know is I love what I'm doing. I'm incredibly privileged to work for a company that empowers me, empowers our team to do meaningful work with communities. I see the positive impacts that we are continuing to have, both through our business development, through the housing, and in a lot of ways, I can't see myself doing anything else other than what I'm doing. And part of what keeps me driven too is seeing the positive impacts that it has on communities. So a couple of weeks ago, I got a text message from an entrepreneur in Conklin who recently received an award for her business. And the reason she had reached out to me is because Synovus helped her to get her start. And her note to me said how incredibly proud she was, not just as an Indigenous entrepreneur, but as an Indigenous woman entrepreneur, where she felt like she had to push against some things more than maybe other people do. And she credited her success to Synovus and for the help that she got along the way. And when those types of things happen, you're doing things the right way. And that is what keeps me driven and wanting to come back and continue doing the things that I'm doing on a personal level. At a company level, I think there's a lot that we can do over the next 10 years. I'm excited. When I look at how far we've come in 10 years, 18 years, and the things that have changed and the opportunity that's in front of us, the conversation that you and I could be having in 10 years, Gina, and I think we should mark that in our calendars right now to do a follow-up on these, could be dramatically different. I mean, in the near term, I know that we want to continue to strengthen our employment of Indigenous people. We're on a right path. We have a strategy in place on how we're going to do that. We want to continue to build on the business development that we've done. We're coming off of our record year of $660 million. The sky's the limit. I want to see that continue to grow. And then we have a huge task in front of us of getting gold certification in PAR. And I want to see us continue on that journey and see what that looks like. What are we learning through that PAR process? What are we doing well? What do we need to do even better? And I think PAR, as much as anything, is going to help to shape what that success can look like in the future. But I'm very excited, not just for us, but for the nations that we work with. I've seen so much progress at a community level. They've worked tremendously hard to build their businesses, and then the housing initiative on top of that. You're seeing just dramatic shifts in the communities.
Amazing. Excellent, excellent answer. And really, really enjoyed having this conversation with you today. Is there any last words that you want to say to your viewers?
I mean,
how can they contact you?
LinkedIn is probably the safest way, Gina. I mean, anybody can go on our website. You go into the Indigenous section on the website. There's always hyperlinks to emails. That's always a safe bet. I have lots and lots of people that reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to either answer their questions or redirect them to somebody much smarter than I am that can answer those questions. But really, I mean, just thank you so much for the opportunity to come in and talk a little bit about Synovus, to share our story. We have a lot to be proud of. We have a lot of work left to do. But I'm incredibly optimistic and excited about what the future holds.
Yeah, and I'd love to suggest that anyone, all of our listeners, go onto the Synovus website. It's a wealth of information. It's amazing what the company is doing. I was really impressed. You touch so many different industries, from clean energy. You're looking at SMRs now, to working directly with the nations and everything you have. It's really great. So congratulations to you and your company.
Thank you, Dean.
And behind every great company is the face of somebody that's representing them so well and eloquently. So thank you so much to our guest, Trent Zacharias from Synovus. We encourage our listeners to follow us, download this episode, Follow us on social media, on our Instagram, on our LinkedIn, on our Facebook page, on TikTok, and continue to live your dream and find your purpose. Thanks for listening to Beyond the Lair. Please follow us, download this episode, and follow us on social media on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok.